All right. Well, it's time to get going here. So, thank you everybody for joining us today for our LinkedIn Live on 2024 marketing predictions. And since 2024 is not that far around the corner, we'll see how wild and crazy we get with these. But I'm looking forward to the conversation. So, joining me today is Jannah Hobday. Jannah is the VP of Marketing at Brookfield. And I'm looking forward to hearing the owner operator perspective, sort of the deep, call it the deep perspective on, what happened in 23, what you're thinking about 24. And then also joined here by Brent Williams, the chief insider at a website that I know I've spent a lot of time on, Multifamily Insiders. And I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have too. So Brent has the benefit of talking to people all across the industry, all different types of roles. And so looking for that kind of broad perspective of what are you hearing, what are you seeing? And so for those that don't know me, my name is Andrew Cederlind. I'm the president and chief operating officer here at Conversion Logix. And I'm looking forward to this discussion today. So we're just going to dive right in. It's Thanksgiving Eve. How many Eves? 6 Eves. Thanksgiving is in 1 week, which I can't wait for. And so let's go ahead and get started. So first question I have is actually looking back to where we are right now in 2023. I think 23 has been an interesting year, I'd say. I don't know that anyone in January expected things to kind of be where they're at with the multifamily environment. But what was let's start with the good stuff. What was the best thing that you think you did and accomplished and strategy choice you made in 2023? And Jannah, why don't we start with you? What do you think of the best thing you did?
2023 for us was really about streamlining and consolidating, whether that was vendors or just overall strategy. We actually called it Janky Free 23. So that kind of happened in a random conversation one day. And so that's been a bit of our goal. And we've been looking at everything from, vendor alignment and or misalignment, having too many vendors in one space and really kind of, the tech stack, that side of the world and trying to get ourselves into a better foundation side of the world.
Janky Free 23. I love that. I love the year, we're on the Thrive through 25 plan. Maybe somebody's on the Survive to 25 plan. Hopefully not, but that's awesome. Brent, what about you? What are you hearing? What were people doing that they felt was successful for them in 23?
Yeah. So kind of jumping on what you were saying, Jannah, I think a lot of companies have tried to be a little more focused in as far as vendor selection goes, a matter of rather than looking at it from the vendor perspective, but looking at their own challenge perspective. So rather than looking at all these suppliers who all these different, amazing new features, what are their own challenges and really trying to identify that first and then going and find a solution to that challenge specifically rather than just looking at suppliers overall. I think the other thing that we're really seeing maturing on is centralization, which was hot topic a couple of years ago, even last year, and now it's really coming to its own. And so some really exciting stuff there.
Yeah, interesting. So looking forward to 24, and Brent, I'll keep it on you. What are some opportunities that you're hearing that people are really paying attention to, either in the marketing space or just overall in their operational goals?
So taking a step beyond marketing, although it includes marketing, and kind of building on that centralization piece, I think a lot more companies are re-examining all of their roles within their organization from a task perspective. And so they are now really honing in on all these different tasks and then consolidating these tasks into roles rather than having a single role do a whole bunch of tasks. So basically, we used to be a jack of all trades scenario on site. Everybody, a leasing consultant did everything. And now we're seeing an examination of what exactly are those tasks. So now we have a focus on, renewal specialists. And now we have people who are doing just that. Or maybe leasing consultants, where we've always talked about how bad it was that a leasing consultant could be amazing at sales, and then they get kind of shifted into a assistant property manager role, and it's really difficult for them to make that transition. And so we're now seeing people be able to stay in that sales role across multiple properties. So some really cool stuff there that I'm seeing for 2024. Another thing that I'm seeing, and this does a lot more on the marketing side, is a focus on a frictionless experience for prospects and residents through their whole life cycle. I think that since we are such a wild west when it comes to technology right now, and we are piecemealing so many things from so many different suppliers, that one of the big things that operators are struggling with, that I'm hearing at least, are how do you have a cohesive experience across all these different companies and services? And so a real big focus on how do we make that as frictionless as possible.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, there's sort of the fatigue, the prop tech fatigue that I think, I've heard people talk about, and what is, we have this technology, what is it actually going to do for us? Jannah, what about you? What do you think is a big opportunity in 24, either on the marketing side or overall?
I mean, I think as we look at it from my team and my department, it's kind of that continued focus a little bit about, like Brent was touching on as well, of making sure we have the right components, looking at, part of it from my side of the world is more on the, the vendor partner side of the world, making sure that we have the right people helping us and kind of augmenting the marketing team and using resources in a different way. So maybe, we might not be growing our department by leaps and bounds in terms of headcount, but really looking at those strategic alignments where we can bring in an agency or a vendor to help us solve a need that we have, rather than hiring a lot of people internally. So I think it's a little bit of navigating that and kind of changing in that perspective.
Can I build upon that real quick? Heard some really cool things about how when it comes to, for example, Turns was a good example where, as they change up their staffing situation, outsourcing some of these pieces that are a lot more seasonal, so that they can be still very efficient on an ongoing basis with, like I said, renewals or leasing or whatever. And then those other pieces are getting outsourced. And so they don't have those people kind of sitting around or underutilized the rest of the year.
Yeah, no, that's, I think, one theme that I think I've heard, and not even just in multifamily, but just around, is I think that companies are getting a lot more strategic with, okay, is this a permanent hire? Is this a consultant or a temporary thing? And not being willing to throw bodies at a problem the same way that they were in 21 and 22, kind of in the COVID time. Well, let's talk about challenges. And Jan, I'll go to you. In 2023, what was a big challenge that you were really just working to overcome? You said janky free 23, so I'd love to hear more about that.
So, I mean, janky free 23, it really was, I joined the company, kind of about a year and a half ago, and really took a little bit of time to kind of assess where we were in terms of, again, how many different types of technology do we have in this space, and how many different ways are we doing things, and really looking at it from the lens of, one, the on-site team members, trying to reduce the number of things that they need to engage with and still do sales and nurture the relationships with the residents and all of the other things that they do in their daily roles and functions, and also make it easier on my team. So, instead of having to know how to work 10 different, vendor systems, can we get that down to 3? One would be, amazing in some regards, but, that might be a 24 project or a 25 or 26. But, got to be a little bit realistic, but it's been kind of challenging and fun. I use a little bit of a ball of string analogy. So I've kind of had this ball of yarn, and it's had some gum in there and some duct tape and some band-aids, and we've been kind of like trying to peel it back. Last fall, we found a litter of kittens, so to speak, in there, and was like, okay, how are we going to deal with this? So I think it's that kind of being nimble and willing to roll up your sleeves and try to figure things out, and again, kind of using the resources in the best way that we have them to use.
And do you, what do you see on the horizon for 24 that you're maybe as an iceberg you're kind of watching and looking out for?
Oh, an iceberg. That's a good one. I think it's probably on the data side of the world. I think that's something in our industry, it's always been challenging. I've always kind of looked at it as a little bit of art and science, which gets, when you're trying to talk to a true numbers analytical person, they don't really like the art part of that statement very much. So I think it's always been important to look at the data and look at the analytics and see how we're doing, on the advertising side of the world and overall in terms of performance. And I think we're getting better as an industry and kind of bringing some more tools to the space to kind of consolidate that, streamline it, get it so we're having less conflicting data between different systems. One system might call a guest card one thing and another calls it another thing, and you've got to kind of do your best to try to match things up a bit. So I think that's probably, iceberg that we continue just as an industry to see.
I completely agree with you, by the way. I think the data piece, because we're all talking about AI, but AI models over data. So, if we don't have the data piece correct, we're kind of lost in the dark in that respect. And hearing huge number of questions about who owns the data, who can access the data, and do you have to pay for the data? And not only do you have those questions from a single operator with a single supplier, but now you have a scenario where you have an operator and a supplier. And then what about the other suppliers in that operator's stack? And can they access data from other suppliers? Is it a mesh approach to data where I don't say smaller suppliers, but you have like the big PMS, provider who, it's kind of a hub and spoke model where everybody integrates with the PMS versus all these different other suppliers integrating, cross-integrating. It becomes really, really challenging. And then getting that back to the whole, do you have to pay per API call? That's a whole other question, and it can get very expensive then if you're doing all these calls back and forth for active data and understanding who has the single source of truth for any specific data point across all the different suppliers. It is a jungle out there. And so I'd like to see some more clarification or clarity on that front.
Yeah. No, I think the data is always, there's a couple sides, on the one side, us as a provider, we're trying to get as much data as we can because we want to use it to better impact campaigns, and being able to proactively see leasing trends and availability by floor plan and say, hey, let's get ahead of this curve, and integrating with, it's always a process and it takes a long time, and it's never as smooth or as easy as you want it to be. And then on the marketing side, there's also this sort of a limiting of data that we're going to see come out here, with cookies going away and some of the privacy changes that are coming into effect. And so some of these reliable metrics that we have always looked at as either a proxy for something that like an occupancy and sort of a leading indicator of the goal, which is the occupancy, and seeing some of those get less reliable or diminish because of browser changes and things like that, it'll be even more important to focus on, what's the metric that matters, which is occupancy. Are you full and are you leasing well? And that's why we're all here is to do that. And so that's something that I'm actually excited about is being able to have occupancy discussions, and versus, goal 2 is down this month versus last month and things like that, which, can be directionally important, but in the grand scheme, really it's occupancy. That's what we're trying to drive.
It'd be interesting to talk to our European friends to find out how they handle some of these issues, because they're farther along than we are as far as privacy controls and stuff like that. So that'd be fascinating.
Yeah. So let's talk about emerging technology. And I don't think that we could ever get through this webinar without talking about it, which is the 2 letters on everybody's mind, which is AI. And I think that so let's talk about emerging technology and AI, and outside of AI, what are you hearing? And Brent, let's start with you, kind of across the industry. What's some tech that people are excited about?
Yeah, I think everybody's excited about AI. I think that the perspective on AI between the supplier side and the operator side is fundamentally different. I think there's a lot. I think supplier side ends up being more of their own ecosystem, and so they can control a lot more. And so there's a lot less nerves as far as how to implement it, because you're in control of everything. From the operator side, you're relying upon several different suppliers, or not just several, many suppliers, and trying to think about AI in that perspective is difficult. Also, fair housing keeps popping up as far as how does AI play with delicate issues like that, and are there hallucination concerns when it comes to fair housing? And I think that's something else that pops up in that whole frame of thought is, it's one thing to say, everybody's acting in good faith. So you have a prospect who actually asks a legitimate question, and can AI properly address that without going off the rails? What happens if there's adversarial attacks where there's a bad entity out there that is saying, I mean, this may be going a little too far out, but imagine you have a bad actor who creates an AI who's trying to get another AI to slip up and say something that is against fair housing, for example. Now that may be ridiculous, I don't know, but I just think that the whole subject is fascinating. And I think that from the operators I've heard from, there's a lot more nerves, because whose liability is it? Is it the supplier side liability, or is it the operator side? And then also there's one other aspect, and that is it incrementally better than humans? And so it still could have flaws, it still could have holes, but if it's incrementally better than humans, then maybe it's still okay. So there's some really fascinating questions about all of that discussion. I don't think it's necessarily to put cold water on it, but it's just something to be cognizant of as we really flesh it out.
Yeah. I'm now concerned about what Brent, like there's like a novel or a mystery or something in there that you've just kind of like given the context to. It's kind of like, No, but I hear you on the, kind of the fair housing side of it. It's complicated. So, there's the federal side, and then there's all of the, the local add-ons on top. And it's, I think it'll be interesting to see how we keep navigating that space, and being able to leverage the technology and gain some of those efficiencies where, that's certainly what part of our motive in dipping our toe into it. But it's I think it's so new. There's a lot to be discovered on how it continues to perform.
Yeah. Well, emerging technology, Jannah, what do you think? What's on your horizon?
AI is we have rolled it out this year. It's on, I think, everybody's mind. I think a number of us were at UpTech recently, and certainly you couldn't walk anywhere without hearing AI. So, we're continuing to explore in that space. We're looking at, can we use it, in the, the affordable side of our portfolio? Can we use it as a way to help, get prospects through on that side of the world? And then probably some non-technology. So, well, technology in a bit of a way, but social media is something I think that's kind of ever changing and evolving in terms of usage in the space and the impact. And then really the website experience and kind of that resident experience side of the world. And how can we either, through a technology platform or just, platforms in general, layer into those and get those performing really well.
One more thing about the AI piece, if you don't mind. I think what's really, so there's always this delay, right? And so it was fascinating to go to UpTech this year and hear so many interesting stories about actual implementations of centralization. And so it's not the hot button topic, because now AI is the hot button topic. So in 2 years, there's gonna be something else that people are excited about, and AI will have its moment where it's now getting more mature, and we're actually seeing much more, maybe more rollouts and implementations. And I'm actually super excited about 2 years from now, AI, to see what are the real world ramifications and how people are actually using it.
Absolutely. And what's interesting about the AI discussion, we've been using AI just operationally for over a year, maybe a little bit longer, just for us in our business. And we've built in fair housing safeguards, basically, because, even for things as simple as copywriting, is it going to say things that on the surface seem okay, but actually run afoul of fair housing? And so that's something that from the start we were very conscious of, and I know others are too. And it's pretty interesting to hear the AI wave sweep through everything. And I heard a story just recently about somebody rolling out an AI leasing agent and then having to actually have somebody's full-time job to watch the AI and make sure it didn't. So it's like, they talk about AI not taking jobs, but switching, you have a new job, and your new job is make sure the AI doesn't do something that it shouldn't do. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting. I think there's a lot of people trying to AIify, they're an AI hammer looking for a nail, and we'll see what actually makes a lot of sense and what doesn't. And where do you want to keep that human oversight and the human in the loop, and sort of the hybrid intelligence of the best of the people, the best of the AI. How can we find that right balance? And the last thing I'll say is I was flying home last night from a meeting, and I was watching the Steve Jobs movie from a few years ago, and he's, it goes through him presenting different things, the original Macintosh, then his next computer, and then the iMac. And he's, talking about the internet, and it's like anytime someone says the word internet and how it'll change everything, you could just swap that for AI. And the internet has absolutely changed everything. But I think, Brent, in a couple of years, to your point, it'll be, oh yeah, of course it has AI. How could it not? It'd be like saying, of course it uses the internet. How could it not use the internet? And it's just going to be a de facto part of daily life, which is, I think of my kids, I'm like, they're just going to have this, beyond just whatever the phone is that they have in their hand, they're going to have some amazing AI assistant that's going to help them with their day-to-day world. It's going to be pretty wild.
I think it's already happened where, when I hear AI now, it feels commoditized, where if everybody has some sort of AI thing, is no longer saying, hey, we have AI. It's like, okay, that doesn't matter. Tell me what it actually does. Tell me actually what is changing, how it's improving things. And so the term AI almost becomes meaningless to, at some point. It's more about what is it actually accomplishing.
Yeah. That's awesome. And there's a comment that came in, that somebody, talking about how, hey, the AI is going to use its sources of truth based on what it thinks it should put out. And, how training is so important, because I think we've all seen AI hallucinate and say things it shouldn't say, and say, it's pretty interesting to see what it can be tricked into saying. So it's just so important to have those guardrails and have that, have that human oversight.
I'm glad I don't have that job. I don't have to worry about it. I can just
you get to talk about it. You don't have to worry about,
right. Exactly.
Thanks, Brent. Whew. Like that's putting the weight on.
So I want to talk a little bit about maybe 2024 and some of the challenges in the industry. We've got interest rates went up like crazy, putting maybe some stress on owners and operations team, because it might affect budgets. And then rents dropping just due to all the supply coming online, and maybe we've been quote unquote heading toward a recession for like a year now. Who knows if it'll ever actually show up? But the market is definitely getting more competitive, and I'd love to hear, Jannah, we'll start with you. Like, what are some of the things that you're doing to differentiate yourself in a market that, no longer is just pouring renters out, like catching fish in a barrel, and you have to operate and work a little harder to get people in?
I think one of the things we're looking at internally is just, it's a little bit, and I've heard others in the industry talking about it too, of getting back to the basics. I think that's something with kind of the combination of COVID and burgeoning technology, like, AI is probably a pretty good example in that space. I think we've lost a little bit of that human touch and some of how to connect and engage with prospects and residents. So that's something we're looking at, how to work on and improve as we get into 2024, and just really focusing on customer service. How can we do things efficiently and do them really well, and then looking at those training opportunities and possible shifts. And we're talking about some of just different measurement points. Are we looking at the right KPIs? Do we need to adjust what we're measuring against in that area based on how the industry has evolved over the last few years versus maybe what we would have looked at a couple of years ago, and really taking us the time to think through some of those things right now.
Absolutely. Brent, what do you think?
I think that moving forward, this idea of differentiation across the industry is probably one of the most exciting times that property management has ever seen. I'm a huge fan of UDR. I think what they do is just so cutting edge, and some of their properties still have somebody on site, and a lot of properties don't have anybody on site, and it's completely self-show. Everything, it's a whole different approach, and I love that. Not to say that that's what people should be doing, but it's more of opening up the playbook where there is no set recipe that you have to have so many people in a leasing role and then an assistant property role, a property manager role, and then a property manager role. It's wide open on how you want to approach property management. How high touch do you want to be? How low touch do you want to be? It really just opens things up. And I think that what's going to be really fascinating is going to allow us for the first time to put an ROI on some things that we've never been able to do so. So those resident touch points, like, parties and that sort of thing, if we're comparing to properties that have none of those features, and yet we're comparable from a amenity perspective, right? From a physical perspective, and we can see the rents that they're getting, then we can now see what type of ROI there is for that resident experience piece. And that's been really, really fuzzy, I think. So I'm so excited about being able to see all these different variations that are going to be possible now that they were never possible before.
And I think a little bit of that is just, having in your mind, meeting the residents and the prospects where they are, not, trying to do this, all sizes, one size fits all type of approach, and really kind of adjusting based on that, based on, the properties and the assets, locations, and again, the consumer.
Yeah, it's, Brent, you talking about UDR makes me think of just hotel brands. You kind of know, hey, when I go and I'm going to go to this hotel brand, what you're going to get. When you go to Ritz-Carlton, you're not, or the Four Seasons, you're not going to have the the kiosk check-in. You want to talk to a person who's going to come take your bag, and it's a different experience. And I think that I agree with you. I think there's very tech forward, tech focused side, and not that I think everyone's going to have technology of some sort, but it's how much is it on the forefront? Is it hey, you're only going to talk to the AI until you actually need something, and that's just how we do it. And hopefully it's for you. And if it's not for you, there's a lot of people that are going to do it differently, and that's okay too. So it's kind of an interesting. It'll be interesting to see those shifts and those changes.
Yeah, another example for that was the move-in process. So there was a panel with 3 different companies, one of which was UDR, and 2 of them were talking about how they wanted to maintain that move-in touch point. So they would go and they would make sure to meet them. And now, granted, for them, they had older buildings, so it was more important to kind of walk them through the intricate, like the idiosyncratic, whatever it is, the differences with an older building when you move in, right? And so they wanted to keep that touch point, and then UDR was like, we want to get rid of that. Like, we want to make it so they don't need us at all. They can just walk straight into their apartment. And he kind of alluded to what you were talking about, Andrew, where it's, there are some people who are not going to like that, and that is fine. That's not who they are. And so they cater to a very specific type of renter who wants a more, ease of doing things without having to be handheld. And I think that's really fantastic.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question, I guess, for you, Brent, on, talking about the technology changes and sort of having a an identity. How do you think that plays out with the move to centralization for those that maybe are third-party managers, and they have different people that want to do different things, and it's not a unified owner operator? Do you see, I guess, what do you see there?
I think centralization is going to be really fascinating for a lot of different approaches. Number one, who has the power in what type of operational programming do they have, right? Does it shift it where you have a centralized team? Maybe means that it's more standardized amongst all of their clients. Veritas, for example, they are doing something really interesting where they actually are not just taking on third-party clients. They are taking on third-party clients in a piecemeal approach, a la carte. So somebody could use them for their maintenance centralization, just for maintenance, or just for the leasing process, or all of the above. Like, they have, taken those pieces and then broken them apart, and then the clients can take it however they want. So it is again a fragmenting of what should be traditional property management becomes a lot of different avenues.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's like you're getting centralized in some aspects and then getting more fragmented in others. And that's, I think, one of the things about this industry that has always been unique is just the fragmentation, across owners and operators and management. And there's so many different pieces to cover and handle, all in the end result of let's fill this building and get people living here. So it's kind of an interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out over the next couple of years.
I think one of the things with, we aren't there in terms of, the centralization side of things. It's, something obviously everybody's been talking about, but I think it does give that opportunity for people who excel at a particular job function to really embrace that and make a career out of that, and not feel kind of shoehorned into a role that might not be in their wheelhouse. A salesperson doing a bunch of bookwork really probably is a bit of a mismatch in the end of it. And I think that is one of the advantages we can see in a centralized approach. Just efficiencies there and giving people the ability to focus on what they're passionate about in their on-site daily jobs.
Yeah, I wish I had that when I was in leasing. I was horrible at sales. But whenever we had that really difficult resident, they're like, Brent, here you go. And they just pass it to me. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm that guy, right? So yeah, it would be nice if we kind of segmented those roles a bit more.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we're coming close to the end of our time here. Is there anything, Jannah, that you want to add about, 2024 or even farther beyond that, where you're looking and things that you want to focus on and see and future?
I think, in terms of what we're, in part looking at in 24 and probably, 25 and beyond, I sound like Buzz Lightyear in that one, to infinity and beyond, is really, I think, setting that expectation a little bit with, I have to do it sometimes even with myself, but certainly with my team, of like, hey, here's, kind of being honest about, here's the outlook, here's where we are, and here's where we're trying to get to, and here's the, rough estimate of time of kind of, some of these transitions that we'll be going through. And I think a lot of that, just in that tech space and trying out new things and seeing what works really is going to come into play. And I think part of that, you've got to do a little bit of a self-awareness check of, really realizing who you are and where you're going and what that timeline is, to kind of really keep everybody in that same kind of mindset and avoid that point in time where you get really frustrated with things. We're like, why isn't this done? I thought we'd have this done 6 months ago. And you're like, it's the Titanic sometimes. And sometimes we gotta, it takes a little while to kind of make that shift a bit.
Yeah. On the marketing side of things, are there any, we got a question about, geofencing services, and do you see it being used more in 2024? And I'll just expand the question to you, Jannah, is there any new channels or avenues that you're really thinking about from the marketing standpoint? Things you want to use more, things you want to use less?
Yeah, geofencing, it's a little bit of an interesting one. I think as of late, with just some of the regulations in different states, I think Washington State and a couple of others have followed suit on that. So it's something that we've used in some instances and will continue to use, but just due to kind of a lot of nature of where our buildings are located with respect to other things out there in space, it's a little here and there in terms of a strategy. We're really looking and kind of diving in, where do we want to be in social media, and what's the best approach there. TikTok certainly has a voice now, and I've managed to avoid getting sucked into that. But it is something that we're dabbling into, but it's trying to figure out how to do it well, and be a good participant in the space, and not just having, here's our Facebook account and we have a page just to check off the box that we have a page. It's kind of like, okay, if we're not really going to be a good participant in this space, let's get rid of it. Let's make a shift and a change away from it. So I think it's kind of a little bit of the evaluation in that space for us right now. But I think it's, and a lot of that comes into just the buildings and the assets and locations and kind of where we're trying to pull people from too, on some of the levers that we'll pull.
Makes perfect sense.
Andrew, I just wrote a blog. I guess it was published this week, about how at Optech they mentioned there was a study that was done by Optech and Real Foundations. I believe it was a joint study, and it was saying that 44% of companies said that the managing department for technology was the marketing department. And I found that fascinating as far as how companies view technology and what direction they're going to take their organization in terms of technology rollouts. And so I'd imagine that it means a lot more technology marketing focus, at least in the early stages. Although that study was also saying that's already kind of happened, where there was a lot of emphasis on marketing at first, and now next year, more emphasis on more of the resident life cycle, resident experience pieces of the technology. So it'll be interesting to see that shift from marketing to resident experience in 2024.
Yeah, no, definitely.
It's definitely it depends on kind of a little bit my experience of where you are and how that partnership with the IT side of the world, happens and kind of interplays. We actually created a role this year within my department to help, streamline that process and kind of be a little bit of a bridge between the marketing team and our technology team so that we're working more collaboratively, which has been really successful so far. So excited about that because there's a partnership there. And I think, at different companies, marketing has been kind of a driver. And then there's some stuff that, it's like, hey, let's get our friends on the technology side of the world to join in and help us make sure that we're making really, really good decisions on some of the bigger ends of things too.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for thank you for both for taking the time. Thank you everyone for watching. And I think that 2024 I'm excited about. I think it'll be a great, hopefully 2023 was this transition year, and 2024 is going to be, like you said, back to basics and I think see where AI can. I'm excited to see this time next year where how much AI is really making a difference in hopefully my job, hopefully both of your jobs too, and we can just send our AI avatar up here to talk next year, and we can sit back and do our thing without having to talk ourselves. So again, thank you both for coming on. Thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time for our next LinkedIn Live webinar. So everyone have a great day.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.